Hey folks, nice to see you again. My name is Dustin Cormier. Welcome to How to Rock Astrology. Today we're going to be talking about our basically our final nakshatra classification for now, and that will be talking about the tattvas. I'm gonna give it my own short little thrift, and then we're gonna read a little bit about it from Light on Life by Robert Svodoba and Hart to Fouw. Eventually, we could talk about, unfortunately, I would like to talk about the plant, mineral, animal derivation, but my book by Robert Svodoba doesn't give any information on that. It's just what it is. So for now, we are going to finish our nakshatra characteristics by talking about the Panchatattvas. The nakshatras are grouped into one of these 5 elements according to Robert Svodoba. Huge caveat here, ladies and gentlemen. I want everybody to know that I've made an observation about this characteristic. Essentially, I'm really trying to look for patterns in all these characteristics so I can get ahead. This is what you should be doing, is looking for patterns and saying, just like when you're in Western astrology, it's like, you find out that, like, oh my God, that's that way for that reason. As we go along, there are patterns in the nakshatras that we want to look for in order to see why they're there. What do they mean? I've noticed a pattern that I'm suspicious of. Now, we all know, as I've been saying throughout these lessons, that I'm a tropical Vedic astrologer. I consider the precession of the equinox to be important, and therefore the point of the sun at the vernal equinox and at any of the solstice and equinox points. Over thousands of years, these critical points in the year, the sun's place at these critical points in the year, shifts along the backdrop of the sidereal sky, the sidereal stars, as it were. And I have noticed that the tattva classification of the nakshatras suspiciously lines up with essentially the fact that 2,000 years ago, there was a part in time when the vernal equinox, the point of 0 degrees of Aries in the tropical year, the sun happened to line up at that point in the year with the sign of Asvini, the nakshatra of Asvini. And since that happened, the sidereal camp of astrology has maintained since then that this is the proper placement, and that the precession of the equinox and the tropical measurements of astrology are less important than the idea that Aries and Asvini are married together. Now, since that time, there's been lots of speculation as to the nature of the nakshatras, because people have been assuming since then that the nakshatras are married to the signs. Now, it's hard to define for us today. We're trying to discern and digest through deduction what's good and what's not good about these nakshatra characteristics. I'm suspicious about this one because, essentially, as we're going to see, how this classification works is, I got it in here somewhere. Oh man, my computer. Thanks for your patience here, ladies and gentlemen. This is my master list of nakshatras here. You're going to be able to see it once, essentially, I'm going to make a video just going through it. Now, you'll notice that essentially, chronologically, the tattvas go 5 or 6 nakshatras for each tattva. We're going to ignore the top 2 for now, or the top 3 rather, because they're all earth panchatattvas. Well, sorry. I want to make my point here that the first earth tattva nakshatra is Asvini. And remember what I said, that Asvini was considered wrongly, in my opinion, to be the start of the nakshatras. So it's a crazy coincidence to me that Asvini starts the earth tattvas. And so it would go Asvini, then Parani. Asvini is in the earth element. Parani is the earth element. Kritika, Rohini, and Mrigashirsha are all the earth element. Then we start with the water tattvas. Ardra, Purnavasu, Pushya, Ashlesha, Magha, and Purva Falguni are all considered to be in the water tattvas. Then we have Uttara Falguni as the fire tattva. It's Uttara Falguni, Hasta, Chitra, Swati, Vishaka, and Anuradha are all under the fire section. And then we have air, which is Jesta, Mula, Purva Ashada, Uttara Ashada, and Shravana. And then finally there's the earth tattvas, ether rather, in my darn words. The ether tattvas are contained in the nakshatras of Dhanishta, Shatabhishak, Purva Bhadrapada, Uttara Bhadrapada, and Revati. Now, truth be told, like, you can really see that shared essence of all of the ether signs. Like, you can kind of feel it when you talk about these signs. At least I feel like I can. So, you know, we can't just throw this out with the dogs just because of the suspicion that I have, but I would definitely consider this for people in the future who are studying these nakshatras in the way that I am. Definitely consider that there's something suspicious about the fact that Asvini is the beginning point of the tattvas. Asvini starts the earth tattva, and then Parani is also the earth tattva. Kritika being the third nakshatra in the sidereal astrologer's reckoning. Kritika is also an earth tattva, etc. The fact that it starts in Asvini is a little bit sketchy to me. But for the sake of, this is part of what we're doing in today's time, we as people in the new age need to be able to digest the history of knowledge that has come before us in order that we can move forward with discernment, in order to discern through deduction what is bad from our past knowledge and what is still useful. Because you know, there's no sense in throwing out this scripture, this nakshatra classification, because it could be something good, at least until we digest through. Ultimately, it could be something worth throwing out if I'm correct in my suspicion. But I digress. We're still going to talk about it. And it's an interesting idea here. We can see we've just talked about the different nakshatras and their tattvas. The rules to follow with regards to how to classify these are as such. Hopefully my computer stops. Come on. Sometimes it takes a while for my computer to zoom in on the page. Come on, you bugger. Anyway, we can see what's going on here. Fire and air cooperate with each other. Here we go. Earth and water cooperate with each other. Ether indiscriminately cooperates with all the other tattvas. Earth does not cooperate with fire, and especially not with air. Water does not cooperate with air, and especially not with fire. Fire does not cooperate with earth, and especially not with water. Air does not cooperate with water, and especially not with earth. So, for my sake, this is something interesting to consider, especially in terms of defining whether the planet can find its most natural expression in the nakshatra that it's in. Of course, Ernst Wilhelm has given a great description Ernst Wilhelm gives a very important description of all the planets in this much beloved book, which I'm eventually probably going to go through, just like I'm doing with these lessons. It's Graha Sutras by Prince Wilhelm. And in this book, he gives a derivation of the 7 planets as being associated with one of these 5 Panchatattvas. Essentially, as we can see here, Jupiter is ether, Saturn is air, Mars is fire, Venus is water, and Mercury is earth. Now, the sun is grouped in with Mars as fire, and the moon is grouped in with Venus as water. So, it's an interesting thing to think about. You know, if, for example, for the sake of a simple example, if we're to follow these rules where, for example, fire and air seem to cooperate with each other, don't they? According to this nakshatra, according to what we've just read in Dr. Svoboda's book. If that's the case, let's consider something like Mars, which is obviously ruled by the fire tattva. What happens if Mars, being fire, is in an air tattva? For example, my Mars, being a fire sign, is in the sign of Jesta. Yes, happy to say. So the fire nature of Mars finds ample air, finds ample movement. It's pushed and glorified by the push of air that comes from all things air, that comes from the nature of Jesta Nakshatra. Now, if my Mars were instead to fall into essentially a fire nakshatra, it would be neutral. If my Mars fell into an earth nakshatra, it would be not beneficial. It's Rohini, Mrigashirsha, Kritika, Asvini, or Bharani. Of course, this has to be blended with the tropical signs again, right? Because if your Mars or your Sun is in the sign of Kritika, that would likely be, I believe, the sign of Aries. Or would that be Taurus by now? I think that would be Taurus. So you would have to combine the reading of the Sun in Taurus or the Sun in Aries with the Sun or Mars in an Earth sign in an Earth nakshatra rather. And the earthy nature of Kritika would debilitate the Sun and Mars a little bit because fire does not cooperate with Earth, and especially not with a water nakshatra such as Ardra, Punarvasu, Pushya, Shlesha, Magha, Purva Falguni. We can see that Earth and water cooperate with each other. So if we were to take a planet, essentially we know from, again, just to give you guys a little peeksy-looksy here, as I had noted before in the same picture, Mercury is considered to be the arbiter of Earth, the Earth Tattva. So if we have Mercury, which is the nature of Earth and is trying to stabilize the Earth Panchatattva in our Panchanga, in our 5-element energy field, Mercury is trying to do the Earth thing. So if Mercury is trying to do the Earth thing, it's hopefully going to find the right nakshatra to do it in. As we know, Earth and water cooperate with each other. So we could see that if this Mercury was trying to find its way in, for example, the sign of Punarvasu, and again, it might be tough because I'm pretty sure Punarvasu is ruled by, I think that it's the Rashi of Cancer is there. Let's give it something more like, Ashlesha. At least Mercury, Mercury does well in the sign of Leo, where Ashlesha is. So Mercury would be doing well by sign in Ashlesha, but it would also be doing well by nakshatra because Ashlesha is a water nakshatra. It's interesting to think about how they would aid each other. Essentially, Mercury would probably give earth strength to the realm of Ashlesha, giving stability to the seductive eye of what that Mercury is trying to do, and of what that nakshatra is trying to do. But, you know, more obviously here, Mercury's earthy agenda, the managing of finances, the managing of resources and people, it'll be easier to do in a water nakshatra because there's an ease, there's an emotional connection there that helps to, you know, it's less dry. The water, the friendship capacity of Mercury in Ashlesha, the seductiveness of it, gives an emotional attractiveness which aids the earth of Mercury, gives it an updraft which allows Mercury to enjoy doing the meticulous organizing, and it finds satisfaction, it finds sensuous fulfillment in the earthy things. It gives it patience, gives water, gives Mercury the patience and the satisfaction and the enjoyment of what it does to create finances and wealth and establish the self firmly in one's finances, which is very good for Mercury. So, in fact, in the Panchatattvas, it's interesting that, you know, Saturn, air, feeds fire. And it's also interesting that Venus, water, feeds Mercury, earth. And it is a two-way, it's a two-way thing going on there. But it's interesting that Ernst's book does give that a little bit of short thrift. I would highly recommend everybody read it if you're interested in this particular subject. Now, I'm just going to try one more time to essentially show you guys these rules here. Of course, my computer is not... There we go. Feel free to pause and give that a pause if you feel inclined to do this research with me. But essentially, yeah, well, I've given you guys the rules, given you the idea. Now we're just going to read the final word of what Dr. Svoboda says about it. He says that tattva relationships, which are used in Western astrology as they apply to the signs of the tropical zodiac, which is interesting. Sidereal Vedic astrologers insist that there's like two different energy fields going on. There's the sidereal field, and then the tropical field is a different thing. I disagree with that. I think that I'm on Victicara's side on this, which is that it's either one of the or the other, and there's not like there's not two energy fields going on at once. But this is Svodoba speaking to that older understanding of the sidereal tropical debate. He's saying that tattva relationships have been a part of Jyotish's tradition for centuries as the tropical zodiac, which is this less significant thing to them. It's more of an Ayurveda constitution thing for them, I believe. So, in any case, when, for example, the lord of a person's 7th house is in a nakshatra whose tattva is uncooperative with the tattva of that 7th house lord, then marriage or its happiness is obstructed. So this would be like, for example, if you are a Pisces rising and that would mean that your 7th lord is the 7th house is Virgo, and therefore the 7th lord is is Mercury rather. Now Mercury rules that earth panchatattva, and as we can see here, earth does not get along with fire, and especially not with air. So if we have Pisces rising and Virgo is on the 7th cusp, the 7th cusp is in Virgo, and that Mercury is in the sign of, say, Jesta or any of these air guys here. Jesta, Mula, Purva, Shada. If Mercury is in this area of the nakshatras, it's going to be sapped by the air nature, which frustrates Mercury and Earth in the way that it does. Fortunately, it doesn't say much about it. Maybe it'll give us a little short thrift, but essentially the marriage will be starved there in that point. Maybe Mercury will be pushed by the airy Vata. There'll be an ambitious energy from the partner or from around, which doesn't make the seventh lord feel solid. It's almost like in that case, you will force yourself to get into a marriage which has lots of activity and movement and pushing, whereas your marriage is being Virgo being holding the seventh cusp, Mercury being the seventh lord, it wants to be settled and satisfied in its marriage. It wants to find a partner who is satisfying, but you'll feel compelled instead to find a partner who races you up and gets you moving and ambitious and energetically outside of what your marriage partner should be by being a Pisces rising and having Virgo in your seventh house. But, you know, this is just the nature of it. You know, you don't want to be without love. The partner you attract is probably going to have this Vata air quality if that's the case. But it will be your love and you can still make it work. That's just the funny nature of love, is that it's reflected in the obstructions of our seventh house. But it's still love. So, you know, that's part of the fun of astrology, folks. Now, Svodoba and Hart to Fouw give an example from a real-life example from their files. A Leo ascendant, the lord of the seventh house being Saturn. Now, Saturn is an air tattva planet. Saturn rules the air tattva, Vata. So for a Leo ascendant, Saturn is the seventh lord. This Saturn occupies the 12th house in the nakshatra of Pushya, which is a water tattva. As we know from our notes, water does not cooperate with air. So air and water do not cooperate, and neither did this woman's spouse. This is a woman. The woman is a Leo rising, and her spouse was not cooperative. She has spent a good deal of her adult life unmarried, all the while wishing for relationships. Note that here, Saturn in the 12th house, a detrimental position for the lord of the 7th house of marriage, reinforces this prediction. And this is the nature of the thick readings that we're going to start coming up with now that we are astrologers who are integrating the nakshatras with the 12 divisions of tropical Vedic astrology. So this video got longer thrift than I wanted to give it, but this is just the nature of things, you know. It's very interesting to me if this is the case, if these tattvas are a thing. I could see it being very true and useful. Let's do our own research, folks, and look at it with an unbiased, clear vantage. Hopefully I feel like I haven't been biased here. I haven't been unbiased. I gave a bit too much of a skeptical account at the start. I was excited to do that, but my main intention here, I guess, is to give my opinion, but ultimately to stress that the only way for us to discern through deduction the nature of these characteristics is to give them the due experimentation and awareness that they deserve. And that's why we're doing them today, folks. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was my description of our last nakshatra characteristic, at least for now. Stay tuned in the next episode. We're going to be talking about a few things, a short little word regarding the individual nakshatras, and then we're going to be moving on to the next nakshatra book that we're going to be reading from. It's going to be called Divine Forces of the Lunar Nakshatras by Radha. Can't wait to see you guys there. I'm Dustin Cormier for How to Rock Astrology. I'll see you guys on the next one.